Welcome to the YouTube studio here at the Munich Security Conference. I'm Alberto Rodriguez from VisalPolitik, and we're joined today by President Salome Zurabishvili, fifth president of Georgia. Madam President, following the 2024 Georgian elections, massive protests have erupted in the streets in Georgia, questioning the official results, and you have aligned yourself with the people of Georgia, refusing to recognize the new parliament and therefore also the president chosen by this parliament. So, is Georgia still a democracy?
Hardly so.
When did Georgia stop being a democracy?
Well, I cannot say when it stopped being a democracy, but it's very clear, maybe at the time of the elections, because when the will of the people is not recognized anymore, then you stop partly already being a democracy. But maybe even more on 1 month after the elections, when the government that is considered by illegitimate and that has gone against the Georgian constitution has decided to repudiate in a way the Article 78 of the Georgian constitution that imposes the obligation to every and each institution of the country to do everything in their competence and their possibilities to favor and to accelerate the Euro-Atlantic integration of Georgia. When, contrary to that article, the government decides to stop the negotiations of going towards the adhesion to the European Union, that is anti-constitutional. That is anti the will of the people, because for 30 years or more since independence, and for many, many years before, when it was the Soviet times and people were dreaming, the support to the Euro-Atlantic integration aims of Georgia was supported by 80% of the population. And that is still the same number when you have opinion polls, and there was one a few days ago that supports that. When you go against that will, you're not a democracy. Added to that, of course, you have all these measures of repression, legislation that every day practically limits the right to free expression, limit the right to free demonstration, limit the individual rights of people. The justice is not a justice system. The courts have arrested and sentenced 600 people in the 3 months that have gone by. Not even one court has deliberated in favor of the defendants. They've all concluded to the accusation of the prosecutor. So that says a lot about the justice system. And by now, in Georgia, there is not one single independent institution that is not controlled by one party, and that one party is controlled by one man, and that one man is most probably controlled by Moscow.
It's shocking to see the current situation of your country, more taking into account that there was a time when Georgia seemed on the verge of joining the Western communities. There were even talks of its potential accession to NATO and the European Union.
Yes, we received the candidate status just a year ago. It seems like a very, very long time, but that was when the whole of the Georgian population came out on the street to demonstrate in favor and to be very happy about this, what was viewed as really receiving the gratification of many years of moving towards these aims and these objectives.
And I understand that these last elections were the drop that split the water, but it appears that maybe there's like something also happening in the middle, or it was something just this change of the article in the constitution. What explains this dramatic shift?
Well, the shift, it's very difficult to say what is the cause of the shift, but that it's 180% reversal of the direction that Georgia was following under all its different governments since the independence in 1991. The shift, and that is the program on which this current ruling party, the Georgian Dream, has been elected to bring Georgia into the European Union that was promised on and on again. So probably it's a question of the intensification of the Georgian-Russian pressure on the ruling party and on the ruling man that is ruling the party, which had links with Russia before, and probably there were some strong links that we didn't know about that have now come into active.
Now that speaking of Russia, in recent months, hybrid warfare actions, threats against journalists, and cases of electoral interferences in European countries have multiplied. From Georgia's experience, what lessons can we learn from your country?
Well, the lesson is a very important lesson, and I think that the major lesson that we can bring to our partners, it is that Georgia was for a long time the testing ground for Russia's objectives and expansions. Georgia was the testing ground in 2008, and it was not taken as a test, and no reaction. And then you had Crimea in 2014, and then the war against Ukraine in 2022. Same thing is happening. We have been, during these last elections, the testing ground of a new strategy of Moscow, which is a hybrid strategy, no more, or maybe, but at this time, instead of military intervention, the soft intervention through hybrid pressure and manipulation of elections. That is happened in Georgia, and is driving the country towards Russia, as we are seeing. It has been tried in Romania with the TikTok election. It has been tried in Moldova, which was saved by the diaspora votes. And as a consequence, in our election, the diaspora was prevented very largely of voting. And it's something that would be very dangerous in Ukraine. When I heard today the question asked to Mr. Zelensky about the elections, I said, oh, that's another. If Russia has not won the war in Ukraine, that's clear. If Russia does not manage, and I think that it won't happen, to win the peace talks, then it might be tempted to win the elections after.
When every time I speak to people who live in countries bordering Russia, there's like no explanation needed when speaking to the Russian influence. But I have to say that in some parts of Western Europe, for example, in my country, in Spain, many people, I dare to say, tend to see these kind of threats as something very distant. How would you explain to the citizens of, for example, my country, Spain, how could they face a similar scenario?
Well, it's becoming very easy because it's using, in fact, our democracies and the instruments of democracy against the democracies. And when you do that, there are no borders, there are no distance. When you use the new technologies, when you use the social networks, when you know how to manipulate those, it goes everywhere. And it's very tempting for a country like Russia that knows, that has this background of special services and having invested into those technologies, to think that it can manipulate elections anywhere because it's using democracy against democracies. So I think that everybody should understand that what's happening in Georgia or in countries around the Black Sea is not limited to those countries and can at any time be tested and implemented anywhere. I think that the Germans here are very aware about that. I think that no country will be completely immune to those manipulations unless the countries of the European Union start working on this issue, start working on how you can protect better the elections, how you protect them from new technologies, and that's a huge new challenge.
Today, President Zelensky spoke quite clearly about the lack of alignment within the European Union, specifically naming Viktor Orban. Madam President, what role do you think Orban plays in Moscow's networks of influence?
Well, very directly, if we look with the Georgian example, the day after the elections, before any result really were known and any observation had been concluded, he came to Georgia to congratulate the new so-called elected government. So very clearly that was the main support. And that also is a big challenge, I think, for the European Union to not have the ways and means if the European Union wants to have an effective foreign policy. At one point in time, it will need to devise the mechanisms and the voting mechanisms that would allow it to be efficient and reactive. In our case, until today, there has been no decision by consensus of the European Union that has answered this main challenge, which is a government that has been supported, a country that has been supported for 30 years by Europeans, by Americans, with lots of financial support into our institutions, that has now gone from that to being almost an undemocratic country. And there is no instrument in the hands of the European Union because of the voting modalities to have a foreign policy.
We're running out of time, but I would like to ask two more questions, if possible. I wouldn't be speaking to you today without mentioning a key figure in Georgian politics, who is Mikhail Saakashvili, who has been in prison since 2021. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not that inside the Georgian politics, but I understand that you had the possibility to give him a pardon, but you chose not to. Could you?
No, that's not.
Okay,
that's not the case, and this was completely in the hands of the government before, after, and is still in the hands of the government. So his fate is linked to the fate of democracy in Georgia.
And linked to the Saakashvili situation, he was sentenced in absentia. You currently are living in Georgia. This is a tough question, but are you afraid of some potential consequence of speaking so loud about this current situation that could be taken against you?
I think it's my role. I was elected to be representing, and my main competence was to be representing Georgia and its foreign policy and its European path, and that's my duty to continue doing that.
Thank you for being with us today, Madam President. Let's see us in the next interview here at the YouTube studio at the Munich Security Conference.